headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone we learn from it and try and move on. That's it.
Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview, channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Coming up, 2 years on from Brexit. Has it been a success? We'll be asking Real Brits that question. And Boris Johnson, can he have his cake and eat it? We'll be debating keeping the faith with the Prime Minister on campus class. Plus, for my big guest, we're joined by the great political scientist Sir John Curtis to discuss the Red Wall's future. But first, here's the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Darren, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says the picture on Ukraine's border is increasingly concerning as he's urging Russia to avoid a reckless and catastrophic invasion. The Prime Minister's comments come as he considers doubling the number of troops deployed to strengthen Europe's borders. Earlier, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said a situation in which British soldiers would fight alongside Ukrainians against Russia is very unlikely. Conservative MP Darren Grimes spoke to GB News earlier and says the government is handling the situation well.
This is, it seems to me, a pretty direct effect of the catastrophic way the West fled from Afghanistan. I think the British government is playing playing, you know, I don't want to call it a game, but, you know, playing the situation well. And yes, that Foreign Office legislation will be very welcome. You know, one could argue we should have done this earlier.
The Prime Minister and Chancellor have insisted the planned rise in national insurance set for April is the right thing to do. That's despite opposition parties and some Conservative MPs saying it should be halted over the increase to the cost of living faced by the nation. Writing in the Sunday Times, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have insisted the 1.25% national insurance rise will help clear NHS backlog. Andrew Rossendale, Conservative MP for Romford, believes raising taxes isn't the answer.
Not what the people want. They don't want taxes to rise, but I also understand the government have to balance the books, and we have a huge black hole. After the pandemic, the government have spent way too much, far too much than we can really afford. We are in the biggest national debt we've ever had. So I do understand why they're bringing this in, though I don't personally think it's right.
The government says Wolverhampton and Sheffield will be the first of 20 disadvantaged areas to gain access to a £1.5 billion fund. As part of the levelling up plans, the money will be used to develop new neighbourhoods on derelict or disused land. But Lisa Nandy, Labour's shadow levelling up secretary, accused the government of handing out rehashed pots of money and policies. Ministers say the new plans will breathe fresh life into disadvantaged communities across England. The COVID vaccination programme has been extended to around 500,000 vulnerable children in England. Those aged between 5 and 11 who are most at risk from the virus or live with someone who is immunosuppressed can now get a jab. Wales has already extended its vaccine programme, while parents in Scotland and Northern Ireland are being encouraged to take up the offer for their children. Amber weather warnings have been issued for Scotland as a second storm hits the UK just a day after Storm Malik killed 2 people. Storm Corrie is expected to hit the northern half of Britain with ice and winds of up to 90 miles per hour. Yesterday, a 60-year-old woman in Aberdeen and a 9-year-old boy in Staffordshire were killed by falling trees. Around 80,000 homes are still without power. Meanwhile, in the US, a number of states have declared emergencies as blizzard conditions and heavy snowfall continues. Up to 60 centimetres of snow has fallen in parts of Boston and New York State, causing power outages and travel chaos. Thousands of flights have been cancelled over the weekend, the majority out of New York, Boston and Philadelphia. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is warning the storm could be life-threatening. North Korea has carried out what appears to be its biggest missile test since 2017. It's understood the weapon was an intermediate-range missile, which reached an altitude of 1,200 miles before landing in the Sea of Japan yesterday. The US, Japan and South Korea have all condemned the launch, the 7th test this month. Relatives of the victims of Bloody Sunday have held a remembrance walk in Londonderry to mark its 50th anniversary. It's one of a number of events being held in the city. 13 people were killed when members of the British Army's Parachute Regiment opened fire on a civil rights march on the 30th of January 1972. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, where this afternoon we'll be talking about Brexit. Today's the eve of the 2nd year that we have officially left the European Union. And today I want to ask, has it been a success so far? Here's what's coming up on the show. We'll hear the thoughts of people in Burnley. The town was a Labour constituency for over 100 years, until 2019, when they voted for the Conservatives. We'll be having our second Culture Row debate of the weekend. I'll be asking 2 years on from that January 31st exit, has Brexit been a success? We'll be popping in our virtual classroom again, and today we'll be asking about the BBC licence fee and whether we all actually need one. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. Do you actually think Brexit has been a success so far, though? I want to hear from you. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. Well, as many of you will already know, I was a proud Leave campaigner in the EU referendum, where I helped launch the Leave campaign in Newcastle with the Prime Minister. That was quite possibly the most crucial campaign of my life. The Remainers, they pushed a campaign of Project Fear. They told us that leaving would be a disaster with grave consequences in the long run. We were told we'd lose our spot as a financial hub to invest in. We were told that unemployment would skyrocket, would have shortages of everything from food to medicines. We were told that we'd be worse off and become Little Britain. Well, sorry to disappoint you folks, but 2 years on from leaving, none of those claims have actually materialised. Since leaving the EU, Britain has struck huge and profitable trade deals with old friends and new allies. trade deals with Australia worth 10.4 billion quid, where tariffs on 100% of UK exports were actually eliminated. The new security agreement, AUKUS, has placed us in good stead in defence and shifted our focus away from a tiny European outlook, increasing post-Brexit trade with the likes of South Korea has actually seen a surge of 620 million for UK exporters. And now we're even looking at a whopping £100 billion trade deal with India. A post-Brexit Britain is unshackled, and here, folks, we've only just begun. Another considerable Brexit boost has rewarded us in taking back control, actually, of our laws from the dictating European Court of Justice and back into the sovereign hands of the British Parliament. Now, thanks to Brexit Britain opting out of the European Medicines Agency, we've delivered one of the fastest and most successful vaccine rollouts globally, whilst Europeans continue to be shackled by restrictions on their freedoms. Fishermen feel the benefits, for example, of being outside of the European Union and taking back control of their fisheries, as Brixham, who depend so heavily on fisheries, these communities that were forgotten for so long, had their highest sales recorded in history in 2021, selling 43.6 million quid worth of fish. President Macron of France must feel like he's been sewn up like a kipper during an election year. So Project Fear, in my opinion, folks, was precisely that, right? False projections designed to stoke fear. A campaign designed to tell her that what we have wasn't worth a damn in this country. The things that were built up and fought for in this country should be let go because Britain can't possibly survive without being swallowed up by the Brussels cartel. Utter tosh. I said that at the time, I'm still saying it now. But at the same time, folks, and I will say this, there's so much more still to do. When I campaigned for leave, I imagined that Britain could do many things with its newfound freedoms. We could create a globally competitive economy. We could slash taxes to alleviate household burdens, such as the EU-enforced minimum 5% on household energy bills. Well, so far, folks, the only EU-related tax cut we've seen is the removal of VAT on tampons. A worthy tax to scrap, but we ought, I think, to go further. And instead of tax cuts, we're actually seeing tax rises. National insurance, corporation tax, these things are utter lunacy that squander the opportunities open to us. We were told we could deregulate, but so far it seems that all of those EU regulations have been carried over into UK legislation. I think Ross Clark from The Spectator put it brilliantly. He said, if we're going to Brexit, just to become simply a different brand of European social democracy, it's hard to tell what it was all for. So in my view, while the pessimistic predictions of Brexit Britain haven't materialised, there is still so much to do to seize those opportunities, including, it has to be said, in tackling illegal migration over the English Channel. But what do you think? I want to hear from you. Real Brits out there, what do you make of Britain's position 2 years on from Brexit? Let us know at gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. My early 20s was spent campaigning for that Leave vote and then to get Brexit done. I felt so passionate about this, and I know this really mattered, actually, to people outside of cities and university towns. So 2 years on from Britain leaving, has Brexit been a success? And how's Boris faring? GB News reporter Bradley Harris asked people in Burnley, a town which elected its first Conservative Member of Parliament for 109 years back in 2019.
We've lost out on millions, if not billions of pounds in all sectors, and the trade deals what is brought in have not obviously made up for the shortfall of leaving the EU. And I also think they are bending the rules and changing laws as they want, willy-nilly, and using Brexit as a cover to do so, in turn taking away some of the civil liberties.
What do you think of Boris Johnson as a Prime Minister? Do you think he's doing a good job?
Yeah, I think he's doing a good job. I think
With the Brexit, he's done really well with Brexit. With the coronavirus, I think they could have acted a bit sooner. I think we're a bit behind on most countries. Like, he acted a bit less like down the line type thing. But I know, I think he's done a good job.
And then my only other question is on Brexit, actually. Do you think we're making a success of Brexit?
I think it's still early doors. I think I'd rather the money that we're paying Marshall Murthwaite, with German people, like, I think it should go back into the British pockets and everything. And I think it's a bit early. We've got to make our own decisions. The British public chose for Brexit. It weren't Boris Johnson who chose it, but the British public. So at the minute, we've got to stick by him and let him take it as it is.
He's been a good Prime Minister up until the point recently. It came into a tough time, obviously. Obviously the pandemic, which would have tested every government. I just think he's let himself down over the past few weeks, really. Disappointed because I've had COVID twice and my family and myself had to obey the rules, and I think there's indication he hasn't done what he should have done, really, regards being true to the public, and I think it's time for him to go, in my opinion. I think Brexit has been a success, but COVID at this moment in time hasn't now, so he has to go, in my opinion.
I think he should stop in. He has done a good enough job of the country with the Brexit and the COVID. I think he's done a good enough job. I think they're going too far with it now. They're overrating it and things.
And what do you think of Brexit? Do you think it's been a success?
Partly, because they're still having a bit of problems with it, aren't they? Like tweaking it and things like that. But other than that, I think they'll get it through and get it all sorted. I mean, holidays are back on and things like that, you know. It's good, isn't it, that we're all moving forward.
Tell me, what do you think about Boris Johnson? Do you think he's a good Prime Minister, and why?
Yes, I actually do. Yes, he's a bit of a buffoon at times. He says the wrong things. He has made mistakes. And this Partygate, really, yes, it's all gone on. But it's gone on in people's back gardens, in workplaces, in businesses, throughout the country all the time. Because people have just had it up to here, haven't they? And yes, he has made mistakes, but he got us out of Brexit. We'd have been in a hell of a mess if he hadn't got us out of Brexit. We've got the vaccine programme, second to none across the world.
GB News reporter there, Bradley Harris, speaking to people in Burnley about Brexit and the Prime Minister. A lot of people there still saying they back Boris, so let's see if the Conservative Party will. 2 years on since the January 31st exit, a lot has happened. We've taken back control from Brussels and the British Parliament is finally sovereign once more, where politicians, frankly, can no longer hide behind Brussels for their lack of action domestically. We've struck countless lucrative trade deals with old friends and new allies, but the Northern Ireland Protocol continues to wreak havoc, and of course we're embroiled in an illegal immigration crisis that never seems to end. So now I ask, 2 years on, are we really taking advantage of the opportunities that Brexit has given us? I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Vickers, the Conservative MP for Stockton South, and the Spectator columnist Nick Tyrone. Hello to both of you. Now, the two of you are going to get 1 minute to answer my first question and then discuss amongst yourselves. Nick, can I start with you? Do you reckon Brexit has been a success so far?
No. I'll tell you why. I'm an individualist as opposed to a collectivist. That's my politics. I believe in the freedom of the individual. And how I evaluate Brexit is very simple in lots of ways. What has it done for freedom of the individual? So I'd say leaving the EU, British citizens have lost loads of rights and privileges, right? So it's much harder to retire to anywhere in the EU. It's working there is much more difficult. Traveling there is much more difficult. You can only stay 180 days out of the year, as a for instance. And that would be one thing if on the other balance that there was a freedom of individual, there was freedoms given to individuals that sort of made up for that were greater than that. And yet I can't think of any freedoms that Brexit has given British individuals. I can't think of any. Compounding that, you have the fact that you've got all the red tape. We have all this protectionism now at the Channel. And I think that that's made it harder, particularly for small businesses as opposed to large businesses. And I'm someone who thinks that the small business community is very important in Britain, and that's very critical. And the fact that,
well,
that
absolutely,
it's just made
of course it is.
harder.
But Matt, that's quite a gloomy picture there painted of post-Brexit.
Very gloomy, but we've heard it all before.
Take a different
I'm not very
view.
good at the speaking, am I? We've heard it all before, though, haven't we? We've heard all the doom and gloom before. Do you remember when it was all going on and they told us the sky would fall? They told us we'd face economic ruin, that we'd never get a deal with the EU. In fact, one Sir Keir Starmer spent all of his time telling us how big a problem it would be if we weren't in the EU Medicines Agency. And look at how that's worked. Actually, since we've left, we have, well, let's talk about that Medicines Agency. Because of our great British vaccine rollout, we've got those restrictions lifted. Not only have we saved lives, not only have we put ourselves in a better position to deal with coronavirus, we've opened our economy up. We're now the fastest growing economy in the G7. We've got kids back at school. We've got businesses booming. We've set up free trade deals with 70 different new free trade deals, including 2 fantastic deals, Australia and New Zealand. We're going for growth. We're making the most of that freedom. We're hooking up with the biggest and fastest growing economies in the world. We've taken control of our borders. We haven't quite nailed that yet, but we've done a damn good job in creating a fair but firm system that means no matter whether you're coming from an EU member state or elsewhere, if you're the brightest and the best and it's in our national interest, you can come aboard. All sorts going on. I think it's a very, you know what, we've heard from the pessimists before.
Wait, Matt, you can't actually say, though, that we've taken back control of immigration, can you? You could come over willy-nilly from Calais.
I think you've got a very valid point, but actually, because we have left, we're able to make those reforms to the Human Rights Act that mean we'll be able to make the difference on that border and handle the illegal immigration very differently to how we would have if we were still in the EU, because now we're a sovereign state who can make decisions and we've got to pull our finger out and deal with those border crossings quickly.
Yeah, Nick, Lord Heseltine, I don't know if you've seen this, but Lord Heseltine, the former Deputy Prime Minister, says that Boris Johnson's removal would actually be a chance to reconsider Brexit. Do you think there's an element of people on your side of the argument still not accepting that, or is Heza essentially I guess, small minority?
I think he's a small minority. I mean, I think that the chance to rejoin anytime soon is probably very slim. We came through a period where there was a huge fight about it. I think more than anything else, the 2019 general election was about people being tired of the debate. I think people felt like we had a referendum in 2016. Let's give this a go. I think that was kind of unavoidable. So I think the idea that Boris Johnson's going to leave and that we're going to rejoin the EU is totally ludicrous. I mean, anyone who would come in, if you look at the front runners, particularly Sunak and Truss. I mean, Sunak was always a leaver, and Liz Truss is a born again sort of hyper leaver. So I don't understand where the chance to rejoin comes in.
Yeah, which is amazing, actually, because I can remember the visuals of Liz Truss stood next to George Osborne talking about a punishment budget if we voted leave. So it just goes to show you how quick politics changes. But, Matt, hasn't this actually just all proven the last 2 years that the Remainers and the sort of establishment class in the media and elsewhere got all of it wrong?
It very much does. Do you know what? It was talked down before it happened. It's been talked down ever since. And now, you know, when we talk about the fact we're the fastest growing in the G7, we talk about all these fantastic new trade deals. They don't want to know. We're looking for something else to talk about now to, you know, complain about. Actually, we were in there for 47 years. We're 2 years on. It's already a success, and I'm sure it'll be a much bigger success the more time that we've got to deal with it. The last 2 years have all been about dealing with the pandemic, to be fair. We're going to make the most of it now as we get to the end of the pandemic, and we're going to capitalise on the opportunities presented by Brexit.
Yeah, Nick, just very, very quickly there, what would you like to see that would actually make you think, OK, this is Britain, this is Brexit, we're going to make a success of it?
That's easy. That's really, really easy. If individuals, and I'm disappointed by some of what Matt has to say because he really hasn't answered the substance of anything I've said, which is individuals lost a bunch of rights. What are the reciprocal rights that we're getting out of Brexit? What is leaving the EU giving individuals that is making up for the rights that we lost? A big one would be if all this stuff about Five Eyes becoming a trade deal, if there was a big trade deal with the US, that would be a game changer. But none of that's on the cards. None of that's happening. that's not pessimism. That's just realism. We're you know, the referendum was almost 6 years ago. There's nothing's going on with the US. We still haven't even, it's a point to make, we still haven't even signed the trade deal with Australia. And most of the other trade deals are just rollovers of exactly what we had in the EU. So, you know, if there was something more to show for it there, then yes, I would
Yeah,
reconsider.
well, Nick, well said. And thank you very much, Matt, as well. Matt Vickers is the Conservative MP for Stockton South, and the writer and author, Nick Tyrone there. Thank you very much for your contributions to that debate. Plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. We'll be back in a moment with the legendary Sir John Curtis to look into his crystal ball of British politics and find what the future holds. But first, let's see what the future holds for the weather, eh?
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy in the north as Storm Corrie arrives. Let's take a look at the details. It will be a dry and calm start to the evening in southwest England, but the breeze will pick up late in the evening with a brief spell of rain. This evening will also be dry in London with light winds, but the breeze will start to pick up as the night goes on. Wet and windy weather will spread across Wales this evening with particularly strong winds around the north coast. Heavy showers will arrive in the West Midlands this evening and it will turn breezy. The wind will prevent a frost forming, but it will still feel chilly. Storm Corrie will bring the strongest winds to the north with gales in northeast England. A yellow weather warning is enforced here as gusts reach 60 miles per hour. The wind will be even stronger in Scotland, with gusts up to 80 miles per hour possible in the east. This could bring further disruption after Storm Malik on Saturday. It will also be a windy evening in Northern Ireland with a few wintry showers here and there. Storm Corrie will continue to bring strong winds across the north through Sunday night, particularly in Scotland and northeast England. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up.
I hug everyone. We learn from it and try and move on.
That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for your company. It's 2:27 and I want to move on now to talk about the Red Wall and how likely it is that the Conservatives are going to hold on to those seats, that political revolution that they brought about in 2019. Have they lost their favour with their new voters, or is all hope not quite lost? Let's find out by a man that knows more than most. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by the legendary Sir John Curtis, political scientist and king of the pollsters. Hiya, John.
Good afternoon, Darren.
Now, John, there have been reports that many in the Red Wall are quite angry at the Tories and that most Tory MPs could actually face losing their seats in the Red Wall. Do you think that this is a likely scenario, or is this a passing sort of mid-term fad?
Well, let's just first of all be clear what people are tending to talk about when they refer to the Red Wall. It's tending to be used to refer to any constituency north of Birmingham that the Conservatives gained from Labour back in the 2019 election. Actually, that's a rather generous definition. Strictly speaking, we're only really talking about just under the 20 seats that they won that Labour had, frankly, not lost since the 1930s. But anyway, the truth is, of course, is the Conservatives' prospects in the Red Wall is going to depend in part on the party's position in the polls nationally. And at the moment, given that the Conservatives are on average about 6 points behind Labour in the polls, they're clearly in a weaker position than they were at the end of October, beginning of November, before the Aaron Patterson affair and before the beginning of Boris Johnson's troubles, when the Conservatives were about 6 points ahead in the opinion polls. The real question to ask about the Red Wall is there anything about these constituencies that mean that perhaps the Conservatives might do better relative to the national position in these seats? Now, there's some reason to believe that they might. It's pretty standard to discover that when a party gains a seat from the opposition and has a new MP who's beavering away in what is, for the most part, though not in all cases, a marginal seat, this begins to attract something of a personal vote. So these seats end up being rather more difficult to get back in my respect.
It's a guessing game. It's a guessing game. I realise, John, that you're not Mystic Meg, so you can't quite predict these things as accurately as we would all like. But
Darren, it's important to be clear the question we're asking ourselves. Because the point is, whether the Tories hang on to these seats does depend on the national situation. The question is, are there differences locally? And that's one of them. The other, of course, is that these were all predominantly Leave constituencies. And is it the case that, therefore, Leave voters are going to be more loyal to the Conservatives? Well, let's look at this. Actually,
but if you look at the polls, John, over recent days, they've actually shown a bounce back to the Tories, right? Now, they're not quite the same numbers, as you rightly mentioned, as they've experienced over perhaps recent months. But do you agree that actually Sir Keir Starmer has actually failed to capitalise on what could have been a pretty obvious open goal for Labour?
Well, that's a slightly different question. Let's finish pursuing the issue we're meant to be pursuing here, all right? That 6 point figure I've been saying to you about Labour being ahead is the current position, bearing in mind the fact, yes, there has indeed been some recovery in the Conservative position in the course of the last week or so. It isn't true, however, that the Conservatives are proving particularly successful at retaining their Leave voters. Actually, support for the Conservatives in the national polls has been falling more amongst Leave voters than it has been amongst Remain voters. And that actually has been true for quite some considerable time. But the second proof of the pudding is we do actually have had a couple of opinion polls recently which have looked at slightly varying definitions of the Red Wall, both of them conducted in January. What both of them show was more or less exactly the same swing in these Red Wall seats as there was in the national polls in the point in time, A, one, and B, that in the red wall seats, the Conservative position now is not as strong as it was at the back end of September before the party began to hit electoral trouble. So on the polling evidence, at least, there isn't any reason to believe that these red wall seats are going to swing differently from the rest of the country. And that, sure, they're not all going to go. Some of them have incredibly large majorities. Dudley North, Bassett Law, probably the Tories, even if an election tomorrow, they would hang on to them. But there are plenty others, inevitably. Most of them are marginal. Average 8% lead. And so therefore, given the current position of the party nationally, they will be very, very difficult to retain. So retaining the red wall seats is really part of a wider Conservative story, which is, can they recover from the rather difficult position they find themselves?
Well, I mean, that's a million-dollar question, isn't it? And I guess the final two, just briefly, John, what do the Conservatives have to actually do to win back voters in the so-called red wall and the so-called blue wall? Do voters have different priorities? And on that point that you mentioned there about Leave voters, is that because they're actually unhappy with Brexit, particularly in those, overwhelmingly Brexit-back and red wall seats?
No, I think the problem the Conservative Party has with Leave voters is that swung to them in 2019 is that because most of them are relatively new Conservative voters, they are inevitably more difficult to hang on to. They don't have the bonds of loyalty, whereas, frankly, anybody who voted Remain, who was still voted Conservative in 2019, was by definition an extraordinarily loyal Conservative. So the truth is that when the government, for example, was being criticised over its handling of coronavirus before the vaccine rollout 12 months ago, it was amongst Leave voters that Conservative support was falling away. So the truth is that if the government hits political trouble, whether it's coronavirus or whether it's the cost of living, or whether some of the other storms that have affected the government last year over the lack of lorry drivers, shortages in our shops, the Leave part of the Conservative coalition is the more fragile part.
So John, you're absolutely spot on there, because during this midterms, I think it's fair to say that this government faces quite a lot of political instability, so it's going to be quite hard to actually navigate themselves out of these choppy waters. But Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, thank you very much for your time and enjoy your afternoon. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, we'll be going back to basics with the BBC licence fee. What is it? Who needs it? How much is it? We've got you covered. Now it's time for a check on the news headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Thank you, Darren. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 2:34. Boris Johnson says the picture on Ukraine's border is increasingly concerning as he urges Russia to avoid a reckless and catastrophic invasion. The Prime Minister is believed to be considering doubling the number of troops deployed to strengthen Europe's borders. Earlier, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says a situation in which British soldiers would fight alongside Ukrainians against Russia is very unlikely. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor have insisted the planned rise in national insurance, set for April, is the right thing to do. That's despite opposition parties and some Conservative MPs saying it should be halted due to fears of the increase to the cost of living. A second storm is set to hit the UK 24 hours after Storm Malik killed 2 people. Amber weather warnings have been issued for Scotland as Storm Corrie hits the northern half of the UK, where winds of up to 90 miles per hour are expected. Yesterday, a 60-year-old woman in Aberdeen and a 9-year-old boy in Staffordshire were killed by falling trees. Relatives of the victims of Bloody Sunday have held a remembrance walk in Londonderry to mark its 50th anniversary. It's one of a number of events being held in the city. 13 people were killed when members of the British Army's Parachute Regiment opened fire on a civil rights march on the 30th of January 1972. And Rafa Nadal has secured a historic 21st Grand Slam title after winning the Australian Open. He now holds the highest number of Grand Slams ever, beating his longtime rivals Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer by 1 title. He played a gruelling 5-hour match in Melbourne against world number 2 Dani Medvedev and called it one of the most emotional games of his career. Those are the top stories. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's back now to Real Britain after this break.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for your company. It's 2:39 and you're watching and listening to Real Britain on GB News. And how we're in now to my virtual classroom, where we go back to basics and understand an issue that we often hear about in the news but could do with some clarity. Today's subject is the BBC licence fee, what it is, who needs to pay for it and who doesn't, which is more to the point. Now, today I'm joined by Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director of Defund the BBC, to help her understand my favourite subject, the BBC licence fee. Now, Rebecca, I just want to play this clip, show you this clip, which you might have already seen on it's from a select committee appearance featuring Richard Holden MP and BBC bosses. Have a listen to this and then respond off the back of it.
But you expect to go back to previous roughly levels of prosecution from before, despite the strong support, or not?
Yes, I think that it wouldn't be unexpected for us.
So you'd see, so you are expecting to actually see probably a doubling in prosecutions from this year and last year, when you couldn't, as you say, have your enforcement officers out there in the coming years.
And I think what's important to recognise.
Sorry, is that a
yes? Sorry,
yes, okay,
yes, I think that would be expected.
Just finally, do you have a breakdown in terms of gender and income of the people who are convicted of not paying the licence fee?
So we do. We have over a number of years looked very closely at that mixture, and it is more weighted towards the female population.
Well, how heavily weighted towards women?
So that's largely been about 75%.
Yeah, that to me is completely and utterly damning, right? One, where are the feminists saying that 75% of BBC prosecutions over the licence fee, over non-payment of it? Where are they actually standing up and saying this is an absolute outrage in the modern world? And secondly, the fact that prosecutions are set to double. What were your thoughts on that, first of all?
Well, I think it's awful, isn't it? We're in a cost of living crisis, and the people that are affected most by the prosecution of non-payment of the licence fee are vulnerable women. And I think it's absolutely outrageous that, you know, the BBC are happily saying they're going to double prosecutions this year in the midst of really, really trying times for people economically. So, I thought it was really good that Richard pulled out those figures there and forced them to admit that 75% of prosecutions are women. There's clearly something deeply wrong with how they go about enforcing payment of the licence fee.
And pensioners now, of course.
We know what that is. But the BBC and the government need to admit that it can't carry on this way.
Yeah. And then, well, I guess going back to basics then, you don't actually need a television licence to watch non-BBC programmes on online catch-up services, videos, DVDs, YouTube, all the rest of it. But if I want to watch, as I often do, Newcastle United get absolutely thrashed on Sky Sports in real time or other sports channels, I do then need a licence, don't I? Could you just explain for her when you actually do need one?
Yeah, and I think there is a huge amount of confusion around this, which is kind of part of the injustice. It used to be that you needed a license just to own a TV. You don't need that anymore. You can own a TV because you can happily play Xbox or watch any on-demand content. So that's programs that when you're deciding when you want to watch it and you want to watch it at that time, that means it's on demand. And as long as that's not on BBC iPlayer, you can watch all of that on your TV or on any of your devices, your phone or your iPad or whatever. But you can't watch what they call live TV, which is in the industry is actually called sort of live broadcast TV. So that's things like anything that is played to a schedule. So ITV's live channel, Channel 4, all of these programs that are played on a TV schedule on your electronic program guide, that is live broadcast TV.
Yeah. So, but Becca, many would say, right, I understand what you're saying, but isn't one of the great benefits of the BBC and what it has to offer is these vast array of channels that we hear only cost, what is it, 40-odd pence every single day, and all these radio stations and all the rest of it. I understand you're the campaign director of Defund the BBC, but why would we want to get rid of all of those opportunities for stations and radio?
I think there's a huge amount. There's been a huge land grab by the BBC where they've got, now they have the online news, which has eaten away at the income of top quality journalism as sort of newspapers, and also on local radio. There's a huge amount of commercial local radio stations that have been closed down because of the BBC overreach. So we talk about now that they're in a position that, oh, well, look at everything that we'd lose. But it's like they've manoeuvred themselves into this monopoly position. And actually, if they were forced to cut back on those things, which they don't run in any commercial way, then commercial radio stations would come back and newspapers would come back and things would pick up and cover that need if the need was there. I mean, that's how the free market works. Yeah. Well, Becca, thank you very much for explaining that. I mean, I'm pretty clear on what my view is, and I'm pretty certain that you know what my view is, and others as well. But I want to hear from people at home. Let me and Becca know on Twitter. You can tweet us at GBNews and actually email in gbviews@gbnews.uk. That was Rebecca Ryan, campaign director of the Defund the BBC campaign. Now, I think I've spoken more about birthday cakes in the past week than I have in my entire lifetime. I don't want to see a birthday cake, I don't want to eat a birthday cake, and I am a man that likes me cake. And that's because Boris Johnson, of course, has been facing calls to resign over claims he broke the lockdown policies that he himself created. This is what people are saying, and saying they've lost faith in the Prime Minister. Some still really, really loyal to Boris. Is this all a storm in a teacup, a birthday teacup, I might add, or is it time for the PM to actually step aside? Here to debate Boris Johnson's future, I'm joined by prospective philosophy, politics and economics university student Jess Gill and Jake Scott, a PhD student in political theory. I'm going to give you 60 seconds first. Jess, can you just set out your stall first of all, please?
First of all, I am ashamed of Boris. I'm ashamed that he's put us in lockdown. I'm ashamed of the national insurance increase, and I'm ashamed of his woke green agenda. These aren't Conservative policies. These are policies that came about from wanting to appeal to the woke mob. And if Boris resigns over Partygate, this will again be from appealing to the woke mob. Starmer broke lockdown. Sturgeon broke lockdown. And that's what happens when you set unrealistic rules. This isn't something Boris can't bounce back from. Because if not Boris, who? Who has the same enthusiasm and popularity? Who could match his 2019 general election victory? We need to consider who will replace him now. Because if he resigns, we might be jumping the gun and we might get someone worse.
Yeah, Jake, do you agree with us? You know, ultimately, it's better the devil you know.
Well, not really. I mean, Partygate really, more than anything, is just an admission that the political elites knew the rules were nonsense to begin with, or at the very least, they had no faith in them. You know, they implemented the rules with such zealotry and pleaded with us on television to stay at home, whilst they didn't. It shows a disrespect of the office and a disrespect for those voters that put Johnson in number 10 in 2019. But more importantly, Partygate just feels like chicken feed. It's been thrown out to distract from what actually matters, which is Johnson's failings on the other issues that 2019 were fought on, which was housing reform, which he completely backtracked on after one by-election, and immigration reform, which was the principal reason for Brexit and therefore Johnson's position. And I'm sure some people are going to say that the party itself was actually organised by Carrie Johnson. But if anything, to me, that just means that the situation is actually worse. It means that Johnson has no firm grip on the key people around him, and many of whom aren't even accountable to the public.
Yeah,
so
Jake,
if he can't...
really briefly, you've had your minute there, but since he was elected, right, Boris has had to deal with Brexit, he's dealt with a worldwide pandemic, to actually one of the fastest and most successful vaccine rollouts, for example. Doesn't he deserve some credit? I mean, would we really get rid of a man with such success in British politics over some cake?
It's not really about the cake, though, is it? Because that's the final straw. And also, I have to say, the vaccine rollout wasn't really anything to do with Boris Johnson himself. I mean, he presided over it, he certainly did, but he didn't actually have much of an influence. If anything, he botched it because he kept disrupting PPE supply lines, which shows to me that he's not the right person for the role.
Jess, with the Lumen Sue Gray report coming out on all of these allegations, do you actually worry that this whole ordeal, I guess, has actually destroyed the public's trust in politicians? Because the one thing I heard when campaigning for Boris in both 2016 and 2019 was on the idea of him not being, you know, like the rest of the political crop, that he was authentic, that he actually would get things done. Do you worry as a supporter that actually some of that sheen has started to shatter?
This isn't me being in defence of Boris Johnson. And I think it's important to realise now the polls are going to be bad because the news is covering it so much. However, you have to admit Boris Johnson has made some victories, as you've mentioned. Like the vaccine rollout was fantastic. And I think it will be more of an apology to the British public if we are the first country to get out of lockdown. If perhaps maybe we should encourage bringing back the fines, refunding people on the fines, because even the politicians have realised this doesn't mean being in defence of Boris Johnson. But if not Boris Johnson again, who would it be?
Well, actually, on that point, to the both of you, out of our current politicians, who do you reckon would be the best leader for what? Are you still standing by Boris Johnson, Jess? I'm assuming you are.
I wouldn't be standing by Boris Johnson, in all honesty, but I think realistically it'll be out to Sunak, Truss or Gove, and I don't really support them. I'd say they'd be even worse than Boris Johnson. So I think he's the worst out of a bad bunch. I mean, the best out of a bad bunch, sorry.
Yeah. Jake, same question for you.
I actually agree with Jess on pretty much everything she said. But the only point really for me is that we have to get rid of Johnson because of not just him, but the people around him, as I rightly say. And then we can let the leadership election process sort the wheat from the chaff. I don't know who would win the leadership runoff, but I don't know of any of them that I actually would support.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to the two of you. That was brilliant. So that was Jake Scott and Jess Gill, a prospective PPA University student. Now, for my final segment of the show today, we're going to be discussing whether we should scrap, reform, I've got my little props here, or keep the rise in national insurance. It's been hotly debated all morning on GB News. I hope you were up. It was confirmed last night by Boris Johnson and the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, that it's the right plan and must go ahead. It's set to actually squeeze the pockets of more of the British people in April at the same time, right, that we're experiencing soaring energy bills and inflation. So I want to talk to my good friend here, Darren Friend from the Taxpayers Alliance. Hello, Darren. Now, Darren, could you just explain what this national insurance hike actually means in April to the taxpayer? How much less well off are we going to be in the communities that we've been talking about today in the Red Wall and elsewhere, who are already struggling to make ends meet, especially, as I say, with soaring inflation and energy bills?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Darren, for having me on the show. And so when we're talking about national insurance, what the government's doing from April is there's going to be a 1.25% increase in national insurance, so the amount you're paying in terms of the rate on people that are employed, on employers, and on the self-employed. And how that's going to be affecting those that are working class and people in those red wall seats, it's actually going to hit them disproportionately. Because let's look at some of the people that are earning the least in the country. For example, someone earning £15,000, they're going to currently be paying £652 in national insurance. Now, after the rise, that's going to go up by another £68. So while the tax rate itself is going to be going up by 1.25 percentage points, it's actually going to be a 10% increase in the amount that people are actually paying in national insurance.
Yeah, and I mean, you at the Taxpayers Alliance then, what would you be saying was a suitable alternative perhaps to the national insurance rise? Because I'm sure you'll have seen people like Jeremy Hunt, former Health Secretary for many years, he has said, or I assume he would say, something along the lines of, well, hang on, what is going to plug the funding gap for social care, for example?
Well, what we'd be doing in terms of the scrap reform or keep side of this segment is we'd be saying to scrap this rise because it's unfair on taxpayers at this time. And what we'd be saying instead of that is fund it by making the government more efficient. I mean, we had a minister in the government resign this week because there was £29 billion of fraud. We at the Taxpayers Alliance find waste in government seemingly every day. We did a campaign with the Daily Mail that found £6 billion in 1 year alone. And so what I'd be saying to the Prime Minister and ministers throughout the government is saying, make the state more efficient rather than consistently asking for taxpayers who are already facing a near 70-year tax burden, 70-year high tax burden.
Yeah,
be more efficient
exactly.
in government rather than asking them for more money.
Watching the show today as well, they might be of the view that national insurance is actually going into some individual pot for their own personal allowance, things like social care and pensions. So that, for me, is why I am totally with you on scrapping this tax, because I think actually they should just merge the two, general taxation and national insurance, because that's essentially what it is, and we need to get to grips. We need to find other alternatives to plug that social care gap. So, Darren Friend from the Taxpayers Alliance, thank you very much for speaking to her today. Now, let us know what you think, of course, folks. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I keep getting that name wrong. Let us know, what would you do for national insurance? Would you be pro-scrapping it? Would you reform it? Would you keep it? Do you think actually it's really necessary? Now, lots of you have been getting in touch already to tell us whether or not you think Brexit has been a success. Elizabeth says that Brexit has caused a headache with suppliers to the EU. She voted to remain and she's still proud of that decision. William says, based on the complexity of COVID, in addition to the change in trading with the EU, it's hard to reach a conclusion at this time. However, he says, the doomsday predictions were wrong. It's been tough being based in the EU and send presents, etc. However, that's a pretty small inconvenience. Exactly right, I agree with that. Pretty small inconvenience for democracy and restoring parliamentary sovereignty, if you ask me. Thank you very much for your company today. I'll see you next weekend on Real Britain.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking wet and windy in the north as Storm Corrie arrives. Let's take a look at the details. It will be a dry and calm start to the evening in southwest England, but the breeze will pick up late in the evening with a brief spell of rain. This evening will also be dry in London with light winds, but the breeze will start to pick up as the night goes on. Wet and windy weather will spread across Wales this evening with particularly strong winds around the north coast. Heavy showers will arrive in the West Midlands this evening and it will turn breezy. The wind will prevent a frost forming, but it will still feel chilly. Storm Corrie will bring the strongest winds to the north, with gales in north-east England. A yellow weather warning is enforced here as gusts reach 60 miles per hour. The wind will be even stronger in Scotland, with gusts up to 80 miles per hour possible in the east. This could bring further disruption after Storm Malik on Saturday. It will also be a windy evening in Northern Ireland, with a few wintry showers here and there. Storm Corrie will continue to bring strong winds across the north through Sunday night, particularly in Scotland and north-east England. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. You can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it? I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat. Every weekday at 1, you're on the money.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints over a drink.